What up, yo? It's Brandon with DIY Sound Library again, and today I got actually a video version for this free guide, so you can reference between this video podcast and the guide itself on how to produce better songs for your records and for your band. And this one I have 3 kind of main steps that I found that work the best when I create music, and these are very important. They're only 3, but they're these 3 things that I found seem to work the most. So at the end of this guide, I hope that you can take these things and use them to your advantage and make better songs. I mean, that's what this is all about anyway. All right, so the most important thing, the first step that I put here is to get an emotional response from your song. Some kind of feeling that comes across is so important. And you want to make sure that your fans feel this, but also that you feel this when you make the song itself. If you really think about it, why we like certain music, why we like certain songs, why are certain artists or genres, why do we love them so much? It's because they give us a certain feeling when we listen to it. So I highly encourage that you explore this first point of making sure that your song has some kind of emotional response or feeling or attitude or vibe to it that you really love. Whether that be angry, emotional, happy, upset, calming, or heavenly and ethereal. All these different vibes and feelings are things that your music can give off, and none of them are right or wrong. But it's important to have something that ties it down, some kind of feeling or emotion to it. Otherwise, it's just a boring song. Like, there's no point in listening to it. The reason why we listen to songs is because they move us to a certain degree. They take us from point A to point B, or they make us feel like we're in a certain situation that either we never were in before or something that's nostalgic, and it makes you feel something. So a couple things to bring that out that you can really think about is listen back to some of your favorite songs. Some of your favorite songs that you personally like are things that you should dissect and really listen to over and over again and try to use in your own songs. Is it the room tone that they're using? Is it the reverb? Is it the closeness? Is it the tightness of the performance? And try to emulate that in your own tracks. Sometimes it means practicing a lot more. Sometimes it means hiring a better engineer. Sometimes it means hiring a better mix guy. But really pinpoint your favorite songs. What is it that you like? And try to put that in your own music to get that feeling across. It's so important. So I encourage you to really dissect these songs. Is it the vocal lines? Is it the way the guitar's played? Is it the tone? Sometimes it's just the tones. It's not necessarily the performance. Is the tone really aggressive or dull or sharp? And find ways to emulate that in your own music. And I think that'll get that feeling across, something that you love, something that you really connect with, that will make people feel the same thing when they listen to it. Sometimes some of your favorite songs, it's not only the songwriting or the vocals or the melody so much that you love, it's the soundscape that it's all in. It has a very specific room tone or reverb or delay to everything that kind of puts it all in its own space. And sometimes that's a small space, sometimes that's a very large space. For instance, this one Pine Grove song I like called Old Friends, it's very intimate and it's very about this like small but roomy space where you can tell the whole record was recorded in. And it sounds so intimate and it's very homey, and I think it sounds amazing. And you can take those soundscape elements of things you hear about the room tone and the sonics, and you can make that into your own music as well to make people feel that same feeling that you felt when you liked a certain record with that tone in it. So that's another thing to consider as well. And 2 more things. You should always trust your gut and be aware of dynamics. And these 2 things play well together because when people listen to your song, they want to go on a journey and they really want to hear things contrast and go higher and lower and softer and louder. And they want to be taken on a journey. They just don't want to be stuck in the same place the whole time. You don't want to just copy and paste and like have the same boring flat song throughout. Because like otherwise, what's the point of listening to that? That's pretty boring. That's why I think it's good to be aware of dynamics. Make sure to put points in your songs where it's purposefully softer or quieter, and then other parts where it builds up in energy and it's louder. Maybe there's more layers. It builds up. The parts are played more aggressively. And it's not to say that every song has to be this epic battle between soft and heavy, but you should always keep these things in mind because it really keeps your listeners on a journey the whole time and it keeps them interested. And you want them to be interested the whole time. Things to go with that is also like the tempo, any tempo changes, sonic changes. If you're changing your guitar sound throughout, like with pedals, that's another thing that helps a lot with keeping attention is dynamic changes with your guitar sound or whatever instrument you might play, switching it up a bit as the song progresses. Yeah, and like I said before, like being aware of your gut feelings. Sometimes you just know the truth inside, and that disagrees with your logical brain of, oh, I know I should have played it more tight logically to the tempo, but maybe that sour note that you hit when you messed up actually sounded better. Maybe it had more of a vibe. Maybe it was something that you needed to switch up the song more and make it more interesting. So never be afraid to follow your gut. And I think that helps a lot when you want a song to have more feeling and really get people interested. The second most important point is that less is more. And I'm sure you've heard that so many times, and it's almost cliche at this point to say. But I do think it's true. I really do think that putting less overall in your song is probably for the better. You can always make those certain instruments more interesting, more in-depth, more dynamic, more unique. But the more layers and layers on top of layers things are added, it just gets really complicated. And just because it's complicated doesn't mean it's always good. Now, I'm not saying that I'm against layers, because I think layers are very important with music, and they just have to be done right. A lot of good layers, when they're done correctly, are amazing for your song, and it adds a lot of depth and width. So I do advocate for layers, but what I'm saying here is that you have to be cognizant of every single track that you're adding, and make sure that each one is actually contributing to the benefit of your song. Is this guitar solo that you're recording, is this giving you that feeling that you like when you listen to the song? Or is it just another audio track you had to put in? You know, like, is this shaker track that you're adding, this tambourine, does this add to the feeling of the song? Or is just this another audio track you wanted to record? You really have to think about these things because it's either adding to your mix or it's taking away from it. So you really want to make sure that if you do add layers, you add what's needed and not just to add, because that can run in some trouble for you. Also, there's another thing with too many layers and getting rhythms complicated on every single instrument. It's not keeping it simple, which confuses the listener. The listener wants to be taken on a journey, like I said before, but they also want to know what to listen to at a given point. So that's why a lot of mix engineers, they make it a point to have the lead vocal kind of up front and in your face, because that's what most people are listening to. Now, sometimes that can be interchanged with a guitar solo or a synth part, or whatever's the main thing that you want people to listen to, but you have to be aware of these things. You can't have every single instrument up front in your face trying to get your attention. You have to have things kind of in the background and things more up in the front. And that's why I think when you have maybe a couple less tracks, but make those specific tracks more interesting, it's better for your song. It's simpler. When you keep it simple like that, people can understand it better. It's less complicated. So I think that's overall, it's for the better. I'm not saying to make boring songs, but I am saying to try to keep it simpler rather than complicated. I think that can help. And the third most final point here is that contrast keeps it fresh. You always kind of want to be switching things up, even if it's just a little bit from verse to verse, chorus to chorus. Like I said, when people listen to your songs, it's about the journey that they're on. They don't want to get bored. They don't want to get stuck at the same verse that's copy and pasted every single time. You want to switch things up, is what I'm saying. So I think it's important, not necessarily to do that in a crazy way, but just to be aware that, hey, maybe the second verse, we take out the bass, we add a different synth part, and we add a shaker instead of everything that was in it in the first verse. Maybe the second chorus, we make it a little bit louder, more aggressive. We up the tempo, maybe 2 clicks. And it's just that difference. It's just enough to be different than the first one that you realize, ow, wow, like, wow, this shit's actually different and good. And you can tell it's not copy and pasted. which is huge. It's a huge factor. And also with this point, I would say that if you're playing an actual instrument, it's good to play through the entire song itself rather than copy and pasting parts. Now, of course, you can do that here and there and get away with it. But for the most part, it's good to play through the entire song. It really adds an element of change and contrast and dynamics that you're not going to get from that copy and paste. So that's why I think, it goes back to the whole point of keeping it interesting and getting that feeling out, is when you just play through the whole song, the whole part, rather than re-recording it or copy and pasting. It's always switching it up and it's keeping it different, so it keeps it interesting. And the final point that I wanted to make here about contrast is the difference between in the middle, left and right, close mic'd instruments, and depth. So, reverby and stuff with delay and shit like that. You really want to have contrast between different instruments and different parts in your song. Maybe the first half of the song is very up front and in your face and close mic'd sounding, but then it hits like the second chorus and all of a sudden it expands into this vast space of, reverby time and shit. It's like having those elements between the front and the back of the song is really important. You want to be aware of the song itself. Is the instrument you're recording meant to be close mic'd sounding, like in your face, mono, or is it supposed to have this reverby stereo feel to it? Make sure to have different tracks that are different. Make the guitar close, but make the drums in the back. More reverb on those. Maybe have the lead vocal in the back and have the drums tight, like a 70s funk sound. Different genres do this differently, but I think the important thing here is that each genre is able to balance the difference between what's up front in your face and what's in the back of the mix per se, with reverb and delay and things like that. And it just makes the track more interesting. You hear more of a depth and a sophisticatedness that if every track was recorded exactly the same or played the same, it would just get so boring. So it's important to think of, panning, left and right. Don't have everything up the middle. Don't have everything exactly hard panned left and right. Vary it up a bit. Have some tracks a little bit halfway, a little bit 3/4, a little bit up the middle, and mess around with it, but don't have everything the same. That contrast is huge and very important. It keeps things interesting. So yeah, that's pretty much it. That's my conclusion. Those are my 3 main points. Obviously, there's a lot more to making a great song, and these are just a few little things that you can keep in mind when you're making your tracks. But at the end of the day, these are a great starting point, so it's good to think of these things. So yeah, that's pretty much it. Thanks for listening. Happy writing. Peace.